hand over your key cards, and clear your desk." By noon, Howard sneered, sliding my termination papers across the solid mahogany table while his son Logan chuckled in the background. "Your master lease portfolio stays with Vance Holdings. You get zero commission." I signed without saying a word, picked up my coat, and walked out. What Howard forgot was that 15 years ago, my personal entity signed the underlying ground lease and utility easement rights. My name is Dean Miller. I am 52 years old, and for 22 years I served as the Senior Vice President of Commercial Leasing and Asset Strategy at Vance Prime Real Estate Holdings. When I started at the firm back in 2004, Vance Holdings was nothing more than a mid-tier regional landlord managing a handful of strip malls and suburban office parks in Central Texas. I built our commercial division from the ground up, brick by brick, contract by contract. Over 2 decades, I spent thousands of hours in glass-walled conference rooms, negotiating triple-net lease agreements, zoning variances, and master sublease frameworks with major retail chains, tech campuses, and logistics providers. By early 2026, my life's work culminated in a master commercial portfolio comprising 120 prime properties, spanning 4 major metropolitan areas, generating $45 million in annual recurring revenue. Every single tenant in that portfolio, from anchor retail department stores to automated distribution centers, was secured through my personal network and structural contract engineering. To understand how commercial real estate works at this level, you have to understand the fundamental difference between owning a building and owning the ground underneath it. Most corporate executives look at glossy architectural renderings and high-rise facades. They care about marble lobbies and prestige branding. As a property strategist who started in land survey law, I always looked at the foundation: the master ground leases, the utility corridor easements, the parking ingress and egress rights, and the municipal permits that allow a commercial structure to legally function. Back in 2011, during the aftermath of the commercial property downturn, Vance Holdings was scrambling to secure the rights to the downtown Metropolitan Commerce Plaza, a 5-acre flagship site meant to anchor our entire urban retail strategy. The original property owner was an elderly private trust, unwilling to deal with a corporate entity, fearing predatory corporate restructuring. Because the trust officers knew me personally and trusted my track record, they agreed to execute a 50-year master ground lease and central utility corridor easement exclusively to my private entity, Miller Commercial Holdings, LLC. At the time, Vance Holdings did not have the cash liquidity to purchase the land outright, so I entered into a master sublease agreement with Vance Holdings. My personal LLC leased the underlying ground and utility access rights to Vance Holdings for a nominal administrative fee, allowing Vance Holdings to build, operate, and collect rents from the commercial tenants above. In exchange, I embedded specific protective covenants into the master sublease agreement. Section 14B explicitly stated that the master sublease rights were non-assignable without my personal sign-off, and that any involuntary termination of my executive employment at Vance Holdings without cause would immediately trigger a default clause, granting Miller Commercial Holdings, LLC the absolute right to revoke the sublease and repossess the master property access rights within 72 hours. For over a decade, this arrangement remained buried in the corporate filing archives. The founder of the company, Richard Vance, understood the value of my work. Richard was an old-school real estate developer who believed in honor, handshake integrity, and paying people what they earned. Under our executive compensation agreement, I received a base salary, a 15% vested equity stake in the commercial property division, and an 8% transaction commission on all master lease renewals spanning 15 years or longer. Then, 6 months ago, Richard Vance passed away. His younger brother, Howard Vance, stepped in as the newly appointed chief executive officer. Howard was 48 years old, a former private equity middle manager who had never negotiated a real estate lease in his life. Howard viewed corporate management not as a craft of building value, but as a game of financial stripping and cost elimination. He brought along his 26-year-old son, Logan Vance, appointing him vice president of commercial operations, despite Logan having zero industry experience beyond an expensive business degree and a habit of barking orders at senior directors. From the moment Howard and Logan walked into the executive floor, on the 20th floor of Vance Tower, the atmosphere shifted. They immediately began auditing executive compensation, questioning long-standing vendor relationships, and looking for ways to trim overhead. Logan in particular walked around the office as if he owned every brick in the city, frequently interrupting senior dealmakers during client calls and demanding that all commission structures be capped or eliminated. I paid little attention to their posturing because I was deep in negotiations for the biggest deal of my career, the 15-year master lease renewal for our flagship 120 commercial properties. The tenant group, a multinational retail and logistics syndicate, represented 35% of our total corporate revenue. The negotiations took 11 months of grueling work, involving hundreds of pages of triple net lease covenants, environmental compliance audits, and escalations tied to the Consumer Price Index. By Friday afternoon, July 24, 2026, the deal was complete. The syndicate signed the 15-year extension, locking in $45 million in annual recurring revenue for Vance Holdings over the next decade and a half. Under my executive compensation contract, this transaction generated an earned commission of 8% of year-one revenue, exactly $3,600,000, payable upon execution of the master agreement. In addition, under my equity-vested agreement, the completion of this deal activated my right to exercise a cash buyout of my 15% equity stake in the commercial division, valued at $6,750,000. I walked into the executive suite on Friday at 4 o'clock, carrying the signed master lease documents in a leather binder, expecting a professional sign-off from the chief executive officer. Instead, I walked straight into a trap that Howard and Logan had been planning for months. When I stepped into the 20th floor executive conference room, I immediately noticed that this was not a standard contract sign-off. Sitting at the head of the solid mahogany table was Howard Vance, flanked by the company's chief legal counsel, a young corporate attorney hired 2 months prior by Howard himself. To Howard's right sat his son, Logan Vance, wearing an oversized designer suit, leaning back in his leather chair with a smirk that told me everything before a single word was spoken. I placed the blue leather binder containing the signed 15-year master lease agreement in the center of the table. I pointed out that the tenant syndicate had executed all 3 copies, securing $45 million in annual recurring revenue for Vance Holdings across all 120 commercial properties. Starting September 1st, Howard did not open the binder. He did not even look at the signature page. Instead, he folded his hands over a thin manila folder resting in front of him and looked up at me with cold, calculated indifference. He stated that, while the company appreciated my effort in finalizing the paperwork, the board had convened an emergency executive session earlier that morning to address corporate overhead and organizational structure. Logan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, and interrupted his father. He smirked and said that the era of bloated executive salaries and outdated commission models at Vance Holdings was officially over. He pulled my written commission claim, the formal request for the contractually obligated $3,600,000 transaction fee, out of the folder right in front of me and the legal counsel. Logan tore the document down the middle, tossed the pieces onto the mahogany table, and laughed. Howard did not reprimand his son. Instead, he pushed a 3-page document across the table toward me. It was a notice of executive termination for corporate redundancy, effective immediately at 5 o'clock that afternoon. The document stated that Vance Holdings was restructuring its commercial leasing division into a streamlined, automated asset management unit under the direct leadership of Vice President Logan Vance. Furthermore, the document claimed that because my position was being eliminated as part of a corporate cost-cutting initiative, Vance Holdings was exercising an internal policy clause to void all uncollected commissions and deny my equity buyout rights. I looked at Howard and asked for clarification. I asked if he was officially terminating my employment without cause after 22 years of service, while refusing to honor the 8% commission on a $45 million contract that I personally negotiated and closed. Howard sneered and leaned back in his chair. He told me that the company had consulted outside legal counsel and determined that executive commissions were discretionary bonuses subject to executive board approval. He claimed that paying a single director $3.6 million in cash, alongside a $6.75 million equity redemption, was financially irresponsible and detrimental to shareholder value. He added that if I felt aggrieved, I was welcome to retain legal counsel and spend the next 5 years fighting their corporate legal retainer in court. Logan added with a smug chuckle that I was 52 years old and obsolete. He said that the modern commercial real estate market did not need old-school negotiators who relied on personal relationships and complex land lease covenants. He told me to hand over my building access keycard, return my corporate laptop, and clear my desk by 5 o'clock, or corporate security would escort me from the premises like a common trespasser. In situations like this, most people lose their temper. They scream, they slam doors, they threaten lawsuits, or they make dramatic speeches about loyalties and sacrifice. Over 22 years in commercial real estate, I learned that anger is an emotion for amateur negotiators. True power lies in structural leverage and precise contractual timing. I did not raise my voice. My heart rate did not even spike. I picked up a pen from the conference table, calmly signed the acknowledgement of receipt on the termination notice, and noted the exact time. Friday, July 24, 2026, at 4:32 p.m. I handed the signed copy back to Howard's corporate attorney, who looked visibly uncomfortable with how calm I was acting. I stood up, picked up my leather briefcase, and walked down the hallway to my corner office. I did not touch the corporate laptop, nor did I attempt to download any internal files or database records. Doing so would have given their legal team grounds to claim trade secret theft or breach of fiduciary duty. Instead, I simply opened my desk drawer, retrieved my personal notebook containing private LLC filings, collected my coat, and placed my corporate access keycard on the center of the desk. As I walked out of the glass doors toward the elevator bank, Logan Vance was standing by the reception desk with 2 uniformed security guards, watching me with a smug smile. He called out across the lobby, telling me to enjoy my early retirement and reminding me that the commercial real estate world was small, suggesting I would never work in the Texas market again. I turned around, looked Logan straight in the eyes, and gave him a polite, subtle smile. I told him to make sure he thoroughly read every page of the master property file before Monday morning. Then I stepped into the elevator. The heavy brass doors closed, and I descended to the street level. It was 4:50 p.m. on a hot Friday afternoon. As I walked out onto the granite plaza of Metropolitan Commerce Plaza, I felt no stress, no anger, and no regret. Howard and Logan thought they had just saved Vance Holdings over $10 million in cash payouts while seizing control of a $45 million annual revenue engine. What they did not realize was that by signing my involuntary termination without cause, Howard had just pulled the pin on a legal grenade that had been sitting in the county real estate archives for 15 years. Instead of driving home to dwell on what had just happened, I drove straight to the downtown office of Albright and Associates, a specialized commercial real estate law firm. I had retained Conrad Albright, a brilliant real estate attorney with 30 years of commercial litigation experience, over a decade ago specifically to manage the corporate filings for Miller Commercial Holdings, LLC. Conrad welcomed me into his office on the 16th floor overlooking the city skyline. I handed him the signed termination notice executed by Howard Vance, along with the certified copy of the newly executed 15-year master lease renewal. Conrad reviewed the termination papers, pulled off his reading glasses, and let out a long, quiet whistle. He observed that Howard and Logan Vance had committed the classic error of inexperienced corporate raiders. They looked at executive payroll numbers without auditing the underlying real estate property encumbrances. Conrad opened a thick, fireproof legal folder pulled from his firm's vault. Inside was the original 2011 master ground lease and utility corridor easement agreement, executed between the Metropolitan Commerce Trust and Miller Commercial Holdings LLC, alongside the 2011 Master Sublease Agreement between my LLC and Vance Prime Real Estate Holdings. Conrad turned to Section 14B of the Master Sublease Contract and read the specific covenants aloud. Under the explicit terms of the contract, Miller Commercial Holdings LLC retained fee-simple ground lease control over the 5-acre downtown plaza, including all foundational support piers, subterranean electrical utility conduits, central HVAC chiller plants, and commercial loading dock access roads. The sublease agreement granted Vance Holdings a conditional operating license to manage the retail structures built on top of that ground. However, Section 14B contained two non-negotiable legal triggers. First, the sublease license was personal to Dean Miller and strictly non-assignable to any third party or successor executive without my express written consent. Second, in the event of my involuntary termination from Vance Holdings without cause, the sublease license automatically entered a state of technical default. Under Section 14B, my personal LLC was granted the absolute contractual right to serve a 72-hour notice of default and cure revocation. If Vance Holdings failed to cure the breach by reinstating my executive status and fulfilling all financial obligations, specifically the $3.6 million transaction commission and the $6.75 million equity redemption, the master sublease automatically terminated. Furthermore, under Texas Property Code Section 93.002 regarding commercial landlord remedies and Article 2A of the Uniform Commercial Code governing commercial lease defaults, a primary ground lessee, exercising a lawful sublease revocation, is entitled to immediate physical possession of the property, including the legal right to alter entrance locks, suspend non-essential utility access across private easements, and deny commercial access to non-compliant subtenants. Conrad looked across his desk and asked me if I was ready to proceed. He reminded me that once we filed the revocation documents with the county recorder and served the formal notices, it would shut down the flagship commercial plaza and create an operational crisis for Vance Holdings that no corporate attorney could undo. I looked at Conrad and told him to execute the filing immediately. At 5:55 p.m. on Friday afternoon, 5 minutes before the county clerk's office closed for the weekend, Conrad's senior legal clerk officially recorded the notice of sublease default, utility easement revocation, and master ingress lockout against Vance Prime Real Estate Holdings in the public property records. Simultaneously, 2 certified private process servers were dispatched. The first process server delivered formal legal copies of the revocation notice to the corporate security desk at Vance Tower. The second process server drove out to Howard Vance's gated estate in the suburbs, delivering the notice directly to Howard as he was sitting by his swimming pool, celebrating what he believed was his $10 million corporate victory. The legal notice was stark, precise, and legally binding. It gave Vance Holdings exactly 72 hours, until Monday morning, July 27, 2026, at 6:00 a.m., to cure the default by executing full wire transfers totaling $10,350,000 into the escrow account of Miller Commercial Holdings, LLC. The notice clearly stated that if the default was not fully cured by 6:00 a.m. on Monday, Miller Commercial Holdings, LLC would enforce its rights under Texas Property Code. Section 93.02. Physical possession of the ground. Utility corridors, HVAC chiller plants, and loading dock access points would revert entirely to my LLC. All commercial tenant operating permits issued under Vance Holdings' master sublease would instantly become legally void, and physical lock changes would be executed across the entire plaza. That Friday evening, I went home, turned my personal phone onto silent mode, and slept soundly for the first time in 6 months. I knew that while Howard and Logan Vance were spending their weekend drinking champagne and boasting about their cost-cutting triumph, the clock was ticking on an operational catastrophe that would demolish their company by Monday morning. On Monday morning, July 27, 2026, at 5:30 a.m., I arrived at Metropolitan Commerce Plaza in a dark navy suit, carrying a cup of black coffee. Accompanying me was Conrad Albright, 2 licensed commercial locksmiths, a team of bonded security officers, and 2 off-duty county sheriff deputies retaining official enforcement jurisdiction under state property code. At exactly 6 o'clock a.m., the 72-hour cure notice expired. Vance Holdings had not transferred a single dollar into the designated escrow account. Howard and Logan Vance had dismissed our legal notice over the weekend as an empty bluff, assuming that no former executive would dare interfere with an operational commercial property. As the clock struck 6, our locksmiths went to work. Under the direct supervision of the county sheriff deputies and relying on our recorded fee-simple ground lease rights, we executed a complete physical lockout of the plaza's ground-level access points. Master digital lock codes were reprogrammed, central security access servers were switched to private LLC protocols, and heavy steel security gates were locked across all commercial loading docks. In addition, under our easement rights governing the central utility submeters, private utility technicians isolated the main electrical conduits, feeding the high-rise HVAC chiller towers, placing the climate control systems on emergency maintenance standby. By 7:30 a.m., the morning rush began. Thousands of employees, retail managers, delivery drivers, and corporate executives began arriving at Metropolitan Commerce Plaza. They tapped their access badges against the electronic readers at the main glass entrance doors, only to be met with red error lights and locked glass panels. Posted on every glass entrance and every loading dock gate was a formal legal notice stamped by the county clerk and signed by the sheriff's department. Notice of commercial lease def and repossession of ground rights under Texas Correction 93.02. Uscapancy and access by Vance Prime Real. Estate Holdings is terminated. For tenant re-entry inquiries, contact Miller Commercial Holdings, LLC. Within 30 minutes, absolute chaos erupted across the commercial plaza. Over 50 freight trucks carrying perishable retail goods, high-value electronics, and corporate equipment were backed up for 2 miles down Commerce Boulevard, unable to enter the loading bays. Major corporate subtenants, including the regional headquarters of a national banking firm paying $3 million in annual rent, found their executive offices completely inaccessible. At 8:15 a.m., Logan Vance arrived in his silver sports car, parking illegally on the curb. He jumped out of his car, dressed in a wrinkled suit, screaming at the security guards posted at the plaza entrance. He tried to force his way through the glass doors, waving his corporate key card and threatening to have everyone on site arrested. One of the off-duty county sheriff deputies stepped forward, placed a hand on his belt, and informed Logan that he was currently standing on private ground controlled by Miller Commercial Holdings, LLC. The deputy clearly stated that if Logan attempted to breach the lockouts or tamper with the security gates, he would be placed under immediate arrest for criminal trespass and interference with lawful property possession. Logan stood on the granite sidewalk, red-faced and trembling with rage, surrounded by hundreds of staring subtenants and retail workers who were recording his meltdown on their smartphones. By 9 o'clock a.m., my personal phone, which I had turned back on after breakfast, began buzzing continuously. Howard Vance tried calling my number 103 times in less than 2 hours. When I did not answer, his corporate legal team began spamming Conrad Albright's office with emergency emails, threatening federal lawsuits, injunctions, and multi-million-dollar damages. Conrad replied to each email with a single attachment: the certified 2011 master ground lease filing, accompanied by Section 14B, and a copy of the county land registry deed. Conrad added a brief note stating that any attempt by Vance Holdings to seek a temporary restraining order would fail, as Texas real estate law firmly protects master ground leaseholders against unauthorized sublease defaults. Furthermore, Conrad pointed out that under Section 18 of the subtenant lease agreements, Vance Holdings was incurring liquidated breach penalties of $150,000 per day for failing to provide continuous operational access to their commercial tenants. By 11 o'clock a.m., the financial pressure on Vance Holdings was catastrophic. Corporate subtenants were invoking emergency lease termination clauses. Emergency services were monitoring the traffic gridlock, and the board of directors of Vance Holdings, who had been kept completely in the dark by Howard over the weekend, had just called an emergency session. At 11:30 a.m., Howard Vance called Conrad Albright's office himself. His voice was no longer arrogant or cold. He was practically sobbing into the phone, begging for an immediate face-to-face meeting with me to resolve what he called a tragic corporate misunderstanding. I agreed to meet Howard and Logan at 1 p.m. at a quiet corner table inside a upscale bistro located directly across the street from the lockdown plaza. I wanted them to sit where they could look out the window and watch the real-world consequences of their greed playing out in real time. When Conrad Albright and I walked into the bistro, at 5 minutes to 1, Howard Vance and Logan were already sitting at the corner booth. Joining them was Leonard Cross, the 64-year-old chairman of the board of Vance Prime Real Estate Holdings, and a longtime associate of the late founder, Richard Vance. Howard looked like a broken man. His collar was unbuttoned, his tie was crooked, and his hands trembled as he held a glass of water. Logan sat beside him in absolute silence, staring at the tablecloth. Unable to make eye contact with anyone, Leonard Cross stood up, shook my hand warmly, and apologized profusely for the situation. He stated that the board of directors had convened at noon and voted unanimously to strip Howard Vance of all executive authority for gross negligence, breach of fiduciary duty, and exposing the corporation to catastrophic financial risk. Furthermore, the board had formally terminated Logan Vance from his position as vice president of operations, effective immediately. Leonard placed a thick legal settlement document on the table, drafted by the board's senior corporate counsel. He admitted that Howard and Logan had lied to the board about the status of my executive compensation and had completely concealed the existence of Section 14B in the master ground lease filings. Leonard acknowledged that Vance Holdings was facing over $20 million in potential tenant default, lawsuits, and complete financial collapse if the plaza remained locked for another 24 hours. The settlement agreement laid out 4 binding terms. First, Vance Holdings would execute an immediate, non-refundable wire transfer of $3,600,000 into Miller Commercial Holdings LLC's escrow account, fulfilling my contractually earned 8% commission on the master lease renewal. Second, Vance Holdings would execute an immediate wire transfer of $6,750,000 to complete the full cash buyout of my 15% vested equity stake in the commercial division. Third, Vance Holdings would pay $500,000 in legal fee reimbursements and administrative damages incurred by my entity over the weekend. Fourth, Miller Commercial Holdings LLC would execute a formal permanent ground lease modification, granting Vance Holdings an irrevocable sublease license while retaining my private entity as the exclusive master property consultant under a 5-year advisory contract paying $600,000 annually. Total immediate cash settlement, $10,850,000. Howard Vance looked up at me with hollow eyes, begging me to sign the release so the locksmiths could open the plaza gates. He whined that the board was stripping him of his equity and that he was facing personal liability lawsuits from institutional investors. I looked at Howard calmly and reminded him of what he had told me in the 20th floor conference room just 72 hours earlier. That business was not about personal loyalty, but about contractual leverage and financial discipline. I told him that he had chosen to gamble his brother's company on arrogance, and now the contract had simply come due. Conrad Albright opened his laptop, verified the incoming wire transfer details with our bank's commercial escrow department, and gave me a nod. At precisely 1:45 p.m., $10,850,000 cleared into Miller Commercial Holdings LLC's bank account with verified federal funds. I picked up the Mont Blanc pen from the table, signed the settlement agreement, and handed the executed copies to Leonard Cross. Then I pulled out my mobile phone, called the lead county deputy posted at the plaza gate, and authorized the immediate unlocking of all commercial access doors, security gates, and utility conduits. Within 20 minutes, freight trucks began rolling into the loading bays, subtenants unlocked their glass doors, and commercial operations resumed across Metropolitan Commerce Plaza. In the weeks that followed, the fallout inside Vance Holdings was swift and total. Howard Vance was ousted from the board of directors in disgrace and forced to sell his personal real estate assets to settle shareholder derivative lawsuits filed by angry institutional investors. Logan Vance left the real estate industry entirely, his reputation as an arrogant liability effectively blacklisting him from every major commercial brokerage firm in Texas. As for me, I used the $10,850,000 payout to expand Miller Commercial Holdings LLC into a premier private real estate asset firm. I operating out of a quiet, sunlit office building overlooking the river, managing a multi-million-dollar portfolio of master ground leases across the Southwest on my own terms. Every morning, I sit on my outdoor patio with a hot espresso, looking at the city skyline. In commercial real estate, many executives believe that power comes from glossy titles, grand corner offices, or intimidating corporate legal retainers. But real control never comes from screaming in boardroom meetings or tearing up written contracts. Real control comes from owning the ground beneath their feet, understanding every line of the covenants you sign, and knowing exactly when to let the law do the heavy lifting.